I see some friendly faces, familiar faces. So I am Bob Proctor, and I will be doing today's presentation, Improving Learner Persistence, Feedback for Growth Mindset. This is day 2 of the PD week, August PD week, and we're glad you guys chose to make it here. Yesterday was a great day. We learned a lot. Today we learned a lot more, and we're going to be delving into feedback, specifically feedback for growth mindset. And we're lucky to have CalPro here. So thank you to CalPro for attending and for participating and for actually creating the foundation of this work. So we really are glad you guys are here. And so again, I mentioned we have Ruben Rodriguez. He will be manning the chat and admitting any latecomers. But let's get started. So we're going to continue with our topic and skill building of improving learner persistence by giving effective feedback for growth mindset. And let's look at our objectives. So we're describing the importance of social emotional learning and its connection to self-efficacy, learner persistence, growth mindset, and letter D, effective feedback. Identify strategies to give feedback for growth mindset, implement mastery learning and collaborate to improve, create an action plan, that's your exit ticket for implementation of feedback for growth mindset. So there's a lot, and hopefully you can latch on to at least one of these things. I know you guys are, at the end of your summer vacation. We're starting school soon, so sometimes it's hard to take in all this information. So I appreciate you guys coming. So here's our agenda. These are for the 3 days. So day 1 yesterday, we did growth mindset, if you remember. Today is feedback for growth mindset. And tomorrow, day 3, is collaboration for growth mindset. And so what repeated words do you notice? That's right, growth mindset. And so this strategy is just one of the 9 CalPro motivation and persistence for adult learning strategies. And we'll talk about why we chose this strategy as we continue together today. So you see feedback is the one that we are focusing on. So let's do a little quick review. All right. So we're going to do a true or false. And at your school sites, you can just do your thumbs up or thumbs down. So let's do a short review. Consider this question, true or false. It is better to praise students for their intelligence or talent than to praise their efforts, strategy, focus, perseverance, or improvement. Okay, is that
I see a
true
lot
or
of
false?
thumbs down from folks. I see a lot of thumbs down.
We got thumbs down. Let me see live thumbs anywhere. Slauson, show me. Let's see. What do you guys think about this one? All right, lots of thumbs down. Very good. Yeah, so that's false. We learned a little bit about that yesterday, right? And number 2, growth mindset is the understanding that abilities can be developed. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Aha, thumbs up. True, pretty easy. We're not static. Our minds and our neurons can actually be enhanced. All right, we have one more question here. Actually, 2 more. Number 3, students with a fixed mindset are more likely to believe an assessment is intended to judge their intelligence. True or false? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Oh, I see thumbs up. That is true. This self-message of not being smart enough is a strong one, and we must work with students to continue giving them the kind of messages we practiced yesterday that show students we and they should not be limited by a sense of limited intelligence, but by unlimited possibility. Assessments show us how hard we worked to learn, not how smart we are. Number 4. Students with a growth mindset are more likely to run from errors instead of engaging with them. Thumbs up or down, true or false?
We see a lot of thumbs down from the schools.
Very good. False. Au contraire. So Dr. Dweck, uh, her research showed how students with growth mindset are interested in how errors can teach them and how we can use them to learn, grow, and meet our goals. Finding ways to highlight errors as teachable moments is a great way to draw success out of errors. So they're not people with growth mindset actually like the engaging of challenges and obstacles and overcoming them. Oh, we have one more. Number 5, students with a growth mindset are more likely to have a decline in grades during difficult school transitions as opposed to those with a fixed mindset. True or false? I see some thumbs down. And that is false. With a growth mindset, we gear up for transitions and we do not have declining grades when we are making transitions. We can help message this as we counsel students with growth mindset and help them find supports when things seem difficult. Okay, good job. Here we go. Today, Wednesday, August 10th, feedback for growth mindset. So let's learn about some of the best practices of specific feedback. So here's our plan for today. Growth mindset and feedback, elements of effective feedback, action plan for giving feedback. So here's the objectives. Identify the connection between growth mindset and feedback. Identify the what, why, and how of effective feedback and a feedback culture. And then apply effective feedback in our work settings to support students and each other. Think about which one of those objectives most aligns with what you guys are doing with your particular job. Are you working with colleagues more than students? Are you on the front lines greeting students as they come into the school? Are you in the classroom? There's something for all of us with feedback. So here we go with our QR code. We're going to be doing a pre-lesson learning survey. So one of the best types of feedback is self-feedback, especially when we reflect on what we know going into a learning situation and then again after we complete it. So with that in mind, let's take 5 minutes here. This is like what we did yesterday to quietly complete a pre-learning survey. If you can't access this QR code, maybe you don't have your smartphone or it's not working, try to share with a partner or a colleague. It's okay if you don't finish every question. It's just more about accessing our current knowledge, our fund of knowledge about this topic to create a filter for our brain for better learning. So we're trying to frame our brain going into this. So I'm going to mute. Ruben, tell me if we have any issues in the chat.
No issues in the chat. You're gonna have 5 minutes and I'll give you guys a 2-minute and a 1-minute warning.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. So when I unmute, I'll share my video. We'll have a new slide and we'll come back. So it is important. Oh, good, we're recording again. So feedback effects of an action toward a goal, standard expectation framework. I read that kind of strangely. It's corrective, specific, and useful. It's understood and accepted by the learner, and it's part of an ongoing learning process. And on this next slide, we see two more characteristics that are really, really important. So specific enough so the recipient knows what to do next. And the feedback meets the needs of each student with respect to his or her current learning. So it's very differentiated, it's individualized, very specific. So if we share feedback early, regularly, and specifically, using standards, rubrics, checklists, this will help that feedback become more effective for the learner. And we'll learn more about this tomorrow in terms of mastery learning. Here's another quote from Grant Wiggins. Remember, no time to give and use feedback actually means no time to cause learning. So if we think that we don't have enough time to give proper feedback, we need to start thinking again and to make that time, because we're learning more and more that feedback is the learning. And most of the learning happens when students can receive effective feedback. So I know that's a lot. Some of you are already very familiar with effective feedback. You may have taken this CALPO training before. So we have some general ideas, and let's look a little bit more at the components of effective feedback. So creating a feedback culture, giving feedback based on learners' ability to receive it, and effective feedback. So we're going to do another little activity here, actually our first activity, a turn and talk about what do you think feedback culture is? And do we have this at our school or in our office? And how can we develop or improve this? So think about these three questions. And in a moment, I'll mute, I'll stop my video, and I'll allow you guys to turn and talk to just one partner to answer the three questions on this slide. So we're going to give everyone about 4 minutes. So in-room facilitators, start your timer with me now, and then I'll come back in 4 minutes. So this is a turn and talk with your partner. And from the pictures, it looked like you guys had some good conversations. So let's look at that first bullet point about creating a feedback culture. So feedback is critical for all of our jobs, everything that we do, all of us. But only if we have a feedback culture and if all our stakeholders, that's all of us, share feedback with each other. So if we look at these different categories, we can see an example of some structure that you might put your feedback in. So for administrators, school leadership framework, classified building and grounds, performance evaluations, teachers, teaching and learning framework, feedback to students, and students, personal, school, core goals, competencies, and expectations. So for teachers, we're thinking about which rubrics, which checklists, which course competencies are we using to base our feedback around. So what is a feedback culture? How can we ensure that the following is true? that feedback and observation happen at all levels and all jobs. Feedback occurs in various directions: learner to leader, leader to learner, and learner to learner. And feedback is given early, regularly, and specifically. Do we have systems in place that allow this to happen? So this might be a good action plan for some of you. And that last bullet point in particular is really important as communication. Early, regularly, and specifically allows people to plan for, work toward, and celebrate or target improvement. In fact, that early, regularly, and specifically allows people to expect and look forward to the feedback. And they'll know when they're going to be receiving feedback, um, and that they know they can act upon it because it's very specific. So in addition, consider the information on this slide and whether this is true in our work, or could we make this true? What is a feedback culture? A campus where feedback is expected, used, and appreciated. Begins with learner strengths and celebrate success regularly. And that mistakes are required for learning and neuroplasticity is understood. So remember, mistakes are required. Mistakes are looked forward to. This is our opportunity to grow and change and learn. Okay, most important is this bold text right here. The focus is on learning and improvement rather than evaluation and judgment. So again, you're not focusing any feedback on how somebody personally, but the work or the task or the process. If we're all engaged in feedback, we're all learning. And when we have a learning culture, we have an accepted, vibrant, and helpful feedback culture. Okay, so here is a small group discussion. So let's take some time to process what we just learned about in the last few slides about feedback, and let's try to apply it. So I'm going to mute myself again, stop the video, and I would like you guys to talk in small groups to answer the question in the bold. What actions might we take to develop this in our agency or program? This feedback culture. So in-room facilitators, let's set a 5-minute timer, and then we'll come back in about 5 minutes. So I guess, oh no, in 5 minutes, take 5 minutes to answer this question in small groups, and then another 5 minutes to have one or two of those people in the group share. Is that right, Ruben?
That is correct. So 5 minutes to discuss and then another 5 minutes to allow them to share in there. So it's a total of 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes. Okay. So let's begin.
Hello, folks. We've got 3 minutes to go. We'll all come back at 10:59.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Ruben, it looks like you're talking, but we can't hear you.
There we go.
There
My
he
mic
is.
is on now.
Okay. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. So before the break, we discussed John Hattie's first component of feedback, which is creating a culture of feedback. And I'm sure you guys had lots of opinions about that and suggestions. So now we will discuss the other two points, beginning with the recipient or the learner at the center of our feedback. Let's consider the two questions on the screen, and we'll do a turn and talk. So question number one, when do we give feedback to students or colleagues? Two, why might students or colleagues not hear or use the feedback we provide, and what can we do about it? So the example is the person may be new to the task, so we should proceed slowly and offer more support. So especially for our ESL teachers out there, if you have lower level students and you're giving feedback, you might have to really parse it down to just the essential point that you're trying to make or give. So this will be a turn and talk, and I'll mute myself, I'll stop the video, and we can do a 3-minute turn and talk. So in-room facilitators, let's start a 3-minute timer, and you will turn to a partner and talk. Here we go. Okay, thanks everyone. So you can probably guess that we need to be very aware of the recipient of our feedback. So here's another John Hattie quote. That students are taught to receive, interpret, and use the feedback provided is probably much more important than focusing on how much feedback is provided by the teacher, as feedback given but not heard is of little use. And ain't that the truth? So people have to actually hear and be ready to hear that feedback. So let's talk a little bit more about the learner and the recipient coming first. So what we know about students or colleagues affects the feedback we give to them. And here are three sort of receiving skills of the learner. There's a surface, a deep, and then a transfer. So this is again from the work of John Hattie, and he suggests there are three types of receiving skills. The surface receivers for newer students to school or subject area or limited English speakers or new teachers and staff. We want to be more direct and tell them exactly what to do next to improve. The second category, deep receivers, so for ESL students who have more language skills or other recipients who have some experience in their areas of learning, we can give feedback that is more inductive, that helps recipients look for mistake patterns or repetitions, or allows them to reflect and suggest the area without us directly telling them. So this is a little more powerful learning. And then number three, transfer receivers. For those with lots of experience but still learning, so how can you apply this skill to your next or other task areas? So these are three different receiving skills or levels. And you might be, students or learners or colleagues might fall on different levels at different times of your day, different jobs. Okay, we have another short activity. So let's apply what we learned about the learner or feedback recipient coming first. So here are two questions to ask ourselves. Describe a student or colleague to whom you recently gave feedback. How did they receive it? And why did they receive it in the way they did? And number two, what is your takeaway from this information about a surface, deep, or transfer recipient of feedback? So we're going to do this for 5 minutes. Again, in-room facilitators. I'm going to mute myself and take off the video. So we will do this for 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Ruben and I were just looking at Evans and their use of the owl. That is so cool to see how it follows you guys around. Do any other schools have an owl that they're using right now? Harbor.
I
Oh, okay.
haven't started the owl business, just to let you know, everyone.
Very interesting. So, all right. So the owl is a camera and a microphone that follows the speaker around. I haven't seen one in person, but looks very cool. Okay, so I'm hoping you guys had some good discussions talking about the recipients of feedback, which is super important. So we've come to the third part. So we first talked about, building a culture of feedback, then the recipients of that feedback, and then finally, what is effective feedback? So this for me was sort of transformed my teaching, because I thought I was great at feedback, but all I was doing was, great job, good job. And that's not really feedback. That's important, but what I learned was actually doing this Calpro training and other trainings was that your feedback needs to be early, regular, and very specific. So what is the tool or way we share school expectations or course exit skills, competency lists, and or promotional rubrics with students and colleagues in our jobs? So think about at registration throughout the campus, as teachers, ESL teachers, ABE, ASE, CTE, if you're a counselor or an advisor, and then as administrators. So these 3 points of early, regularly, and specifically are very important. And we'll look at these a little bit more in depth. So do we use this tool early on with students? Is it specific? And do we come back to it and use it regularly? And by tool, they're talking about either a rubric, maybe a framework, maybe a list of competencies, maybe school rules. Depending on what you're doing, your job, your feedback will be much more effective if you're actually using some sort of document or a pre-chosen list or checklist that you can refer back to. And then we'll learn even more tomorrow that this goes hand in hand with mastery learning. So what is next? I think this slide is animated. Let's see. Aha. What's next for improvement? One or two main things only versus a laundry list. So again, if it's a rubric or a competency list, focus on maybe one or two things. Don't just have this whole list of things that someone needs to take care of, because probably, as we know from the recipient part of this, they're not going to receive it very well, and our brains probably don't have enough cognitive availability to deal with long lists right now. That's the other thing, is keep it nice and short and specific. And then what is good and why? So instead of how I used to just say good job, why was it a good job? Give specific details, something that someone can work and improve upon. So here's a good example. You have lots of examples in what you're saying, but no topic sentence. How might you write one? So the other thing is sometimes we want to jump the gun and just give someone the answers instead of the strategies. So focus on the strategy for solving the problem or answering a question rather than on the solution or answer itself. Teach the growth strategy and reward that strategy and the student or the colleague's perseverance more than the actual answer or result. So this is like the old saying about fishing. What do they say? You could teach a person to fish rather than just handing them the fish. I think that will teach them skills that they can use their entire life. So the connection to understood criteria or that one or two things is based on a set of understood criteria that's shared early and specifically. So hopefully like in the beginning of your class. Examples from various campuses and program areas include the following: a school code of conduct, frameworks or focus elements, learner or colleague goals, course exit skills and standards, competency lists or promotional rubrics. So which of these above is used at registration and throughout the campus in your course of work? I like the third one, learner colleague goals, because usually when you are setting goals with your students or your colleagues, you're doing it in a shared way, and that can make that feedback and that rubric even more powerful, is that both parties, recipient and the giver of the feedback, came up with the same, or worked together to create that set of goals. Okay, so that's a lot of information. And we probably have unanswered questions, but again, remember to just try to take one thing that you can apply to your particular job or role at your school. And if you can just take one thing away from this, that's great. But let's take some time to consider our specific students or colleagues, their work, and how might we give effective feedback. So this is leading up to our next activity. We're going to be doing a museum wall activity. And hopefully each school site has the materials. So that's similar to yesterday. If you remember, you had big Post-its on the walls, I hope. And you guys wrote down some of your ideas. I forget exactly what. So today's a little bit different. So there should be a post or a Post-it that correlates to your work. So classified or campus staff, a counselor or an advisor, a teacher, ESL, ABE, ASC, or CTE, or an administrator. And in your handouts, you should have these program or work areas, and there should be an example of the expectations for success for that particular work area. Maybe it's a rubric, a checklist, and then there should be a sample assessment or a demonstration of that skill. Okay, so these should be in your handouts. And if you don't have your museum wall set up, I hope you could at least look in your handouts and see what we are referring to. Ruben, are there any comments or questions in the chat?
None. We're good with the chat.
Okie dokie. Okay. So here is the task. This is going to be a long one, a 15-minute one. It's going to be a museum wall walk. So in your job teams, you have 15 minutes to complete the following. Use your team's sample assessment and rubric. Some of them are a little more complicated. It might take some time to look at it, figure it out. But you will decide on the feedback to give a learner that scored a 1 on your rubric. And a 1 in terms of mastery learning would be like a not yet. They're not quite there yet, or they're very new to this class or course. 2, decide on feedback to give a learner that scored a 2, which is approaching. They're getting closer to meeting that particular expectation. So we're looking at the new to or the not yets and the approachings. We're not looking at a 3 or a 4, which means they met and or exceeded that particular checkpoint on the rubric. So we're looking at the 1s and 2s. Okay. And if you do have the poster on the wall, hopefully you have pens that you could write your feedback on the poster. So whatever the work example is, think of the particular a score of a 1 or a 2 that you might give with feedback based on that example. Does that seem clear enough? Let's see thumbs up or thumbs down from the crowds out there. Oh, I see. Oh, thumbs up. Okay. All right. So we are going to go away for I
15
think,
minutes.
yeah, 15
We're
minutes.
going to be coming back, folks, at 11:55. In-room facilitators, set a timer yourself, but I also remind you when we've got 5 minutes and then a 3-minute warning and then the 1-minute warning. But we should all be coming back at 11:55.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, folks, we see people are still up and about, looking at their museum wall posters. It's good to see. I see West Valley is still walking around. Good job, you guys. Hello, Abram Friedman. Yeah, so maybe you had time to look at other people's or other work groups, look at their posters, and you can see the difference. I think some of the rubrics were very specific. So like, for example, the ESL one, if I remember, was very specific, as opposed to the example for the classified staff, an office worker dealing with a sort of an unruly student. I think the example was, the scenario was someone came in the office staff was working, helping someone, and a student was impatient and crumpled up some paper and left sort of a mess on the counter there. So it's interesting on that kind of situation. What would be your feedback to that student? So it definitely helps if you have a rubric, that is for sure, or some sort of a checklist, a common document that you can use to chart growth. Okay, we're going to move on. So speaking of checklists, so for effective feedback, here's 6 items you want to consider when you give feedback. So does it answer what's next for the student? Does the feedback focus on 1 or 2 key things for the learner to improve on? Or is it that laundry list or the endless red marks? 3, does the feedback refer back to the score sheet or rubric or checklist or framework or a student code of conduct? Something that you can tangibly look at and the student can refer to see, oh, I didn't do number 3 and I need to improve on that. Is the feedback specific, helpful, and kind? Right? We're in the business of helping each other and helping learners and learning together, and we want to be kind about this process. Does the feedback ask questions rather than give answers? And this can be a tough one for teachers to sort of reframe giving just the answer and reframing it into a question that sort of helps the student to have to retrieve the answer instead of just receiving it. Because we know learning happens when you have to retrieve, use a strategy, find the answer on your own, as long as you're given strategies to find that answer or the tools necessary. And number 6, does the feedback promote a culture of learning and respond to the level of the student? So that culture of learning is when we're all learning and we're all showing the interest and the constant struggle to learn, and the level of the student or the recipient. Make sure it's appropriate. So this leads us to the action. Research plan. I just noticed we have a little typo. So research plan, or REARCH. What gets measured gets done. That's funny. So for the final activity today, just like yesterday, each of us will write a plan or a part of our plan for action research, aka REARCH, which means we will simply consider how would we integrate and monitor use of best practices related to feedback for growth mindset. And this will be your exit ticket, just like it was yesterday. So depending on your school site, check in with your facilitator on, I think some of you kind of went through your action research plan and almost completed them. But remember, I think we're using the same one for these 3 days, including tomorrow. So you don't necessarily have to finish it all in one shot. But definitely check in with your particular facilitator. Are you turning this in? Are you showing them this? Maybe take pictures of it. But let's look at it. So this is your exit ticket. So open to your last page of your handouts to see the action research plan. And don't be put off by action research plan. This just means that we're going to make our work more about intentions. Let's see, I'm just reading a script here. I think I read it wrong. And then we're going to monitor and measure student effects to find evidence of our actions work. Is it working? Do we need to refine it? So we have a strategy, and right now all of us are using the same one, feedback for growth mindset. That's our strategy. Then a research question. What will you do? What are your expected results? And how would you measure the effects? So if yesterday you completed this, you might want to revisit it, maybe add to or take away things, depending on what you've learned today about feedback and effective feedback.
Hi, it's Venice here. We've got a question.
Yes, Venice.
Hi, so the team is asking, we passed back the action plans from yesterday.
Yes.
And we thought we were going to continue working on those, but we also provided them a blank copy for today. Should they continue to keep working on the original throughout the 3 days, or should they fill out a new one?
I think filling out a new one is fine. I think it's an iterative process. And I think yesterday, I know if I had filled it out, today I would have learned so much more that I would want to revisit yesterday's. And if I wrote it in pen, it would be a little messy. So I think having a blank one is fine. I just don't want anyone to miss out on having evidence of their exit ticket. So just as long as they're taking care of not losing these documents, but I think that would be fine to have a different one. If they have a blank sheet today, they could use.
Hey Rob,
And
this is Sudie Whalen with CalPro.
Hi.
And yeah, the intent was for them to build upon the plan, but I love what you just said, because if you learn something new and you need to revise it on a clean sheet, that's great. They'll ultimately be utilizing this information to decide with their professional learning communities what they're going to focus on together. So it's okay to do a new clean one each day if they need to fold in something new that they learned.
Oh, good. Thank you. So yeah, the intent was to maybe use this same one. But it's so funny, like moving from virtual to, in-person teaching with a pen and paper, brick and mortar, online, I just fill it out. I can delete, I can, keep redoing my document. But when I have a piece of paper and a pen, I end up sort of scribbling in every little corner of the paper, and then I need a fresh new sheet of paper. So
Totally get that, me too.
So take time to, Ruben, yeah, take 5 minutes to maybe help facilitate if there's any, extra support that your people need for the action research plan. Just as we're seeing, lots of questions are coming up. So let's take a few minutes. Let's come back at 12:10. So facilitators, just maybe walk around, see that everyone is being supported, filling out their action plan. So we'll take 5 minutes. I'll just mute myself. Okay, we are back. So remember, we will be using your action plan again for day 3, which is tomorrow. And let's wrap this up. What are the next steps? So let's see, how did we do today? Day 2, our objectives. Identify the connection between growth mindset and feedback. Identify the what, why, and how of effective feedback and a feedback culture. Apply effective feedback in our work settings to support students and each other. So hopefully we were able to hit on all of those. I know some more than others. It's a lot of information. So anything that you guys can retain from today is good. And let's think about tomorrow. So tomorrow's kind of exciting. We are now going to be talking about mastery learning, collaboration for growth mindset, which includes mastery learning, collaborative improvement, and looking at your action plan. And that's a really nice picture there. I see Aaron Sands in that picture, and Oksana, Luis, Nazareth, Hiron. Real instructors. Okay, so housekeeping. We do have a sign-in and evaluation. So on the screen, you should have another QR code. So please scan this. I think you may have this in your handouts. I'm not sure. So page 8 in your handouts, you should have this. Okay. So we appreciate everyone for coming today. We know it is optional and you chose to come. Thank you. We will be using many of these ideas throughout the year in our PLCs, in our communities of practice. Hopefully you've seen how they tie into the district's pillars. It definitely ties into DACE's blueprint. And then on that individual level in the classroom, how this applies to you and your students and their persistence and their motivation. So Ruben and I thank you so much. We thank our CalPro partners for being here and assisting. And a special thanks to all the schools and all the facilitators, administrators out there, and teachers. Thank you. Let me see. Applause. Thank you, guys. We applaud you. And remember, there's one more day tomorrow.